What's up, you guys? Henry Gracie here at Gracie University to discuss the George Floyd incident, the death that occurred on Monday in Minneapolis. And as usual with use of force incidents, I get hundreds of requests to do a breakdown and to talk about the incident from a tactical perspective. But after reflecting and seeing the video for myself, I realized that the tactical implications of this incident pale in comparison to the moral implications of what we, the world, witnessed on video. And, to discuss this, I thought it would be much more appropriate to bring in a police officer and the founder of Breaking Barriers United, an organization specifically founded to bridge the gap between law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve, Ryan Tillman. Ryan, thanks for joining me here, man. And
anytime, man. Anytime, Henry.
I've been following Ryan for a while on social media, and he hit me up after one of the breakdowns. I found out about him. We started tracking each other. And she's doing incredible work in his community. And because of the work he's doing with his organization, Breaking Barriers United, other law enforcement agencies around the country are kind of following his mold and really taking a page out of his playbook in terms of how to better connect with the communities they serve, because it is such a big problem. And now more than ever, after what happened on Monday. And Ryan, you made a post on the incident. I have lots that I want to discuss about it, but you made a post on the incident, really, really calling out what you saw as the injustice that took place in Minneapolis on Monday. And, I really appreciate it, because I know that as a law enforcement officer, that isn't easy to do. So I thank you for being here, and I would love to, discuss it with you and hear your thoughts on what went down.
Yeah, no problem, Henry. And thanks for having me, on such a somber occasion, but, because the man lost his life. And, the reason we do what we do, obviously, is because we want to repair everything that's been going on in our society. And so just a really brief background about me. I never liked police officers growing up, never had any aspirations of police officers growing up. And, moving on in life, I got married and, I prayed about it and asked God, like, God, if this is what you want me to do, then open the door. And sure enough, he opened the door and I became a police officer, but I still battled with myself of whether or not this is what I want to do, because initially when I got into the profession, I felt like I was always messing with people. It wasn't until I got off of training and I started learning how to do the day job that I really got to see that I can make an impact in law enforcement. But that's when I also realized that we have a lot of improvement to do, just like anything else, whether it's, mixed martial arts, whether it's school teachers, whatever it is, we can always get better. And when we think we've arrived, we're in a bad place. And so that's what prompted me to start, what I do. And yesterday, as I watched the video, involving George Floyd and, how he was killed, it was, I couldn't finish watching the video, because not only did a man lose his life, but somebody's family member lost a life, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, whoever it is, they lost their, they lost a family member in George Floyd. And I had to stop watching the video. And what I realized was that as what I'm trying to do with bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community, one simple negligent act, immoral act, unethical act, tarnishes a lot of the work that guys like myself and many other officers across the country and the world are doing. And it only makes our job harder to really improve what we have as law enforcement. And so you and I had a discussion earlier, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but my mindset, the reason I do what I do, the reason I call out the bad is because it's more of a global perspective. It's a future perspective. It's a perspective involving my son who wants to be a police officer and making this profession better. And so that's why I do what we have to do. Sometimes we have to go through aches and pains in order to arrive at our destination. And, even though I recognize that I probably do put a target on my back when I call out other officers, it's the right thing to do. So my dad always told me, no matter what you do, always do the right thing. So for me yesterday, when I saw the video and, the results of it, I felt like I needed to at least address this video.
Thank you, man. I appreciate, it's a very, it's a very unpopular kind of position and perspective. I know that with the number of law enforcement officers I work with very closely, And I take my job as a defensive tactics instructor professionally with departments all over the world really very seriously. I'm very proud of the work I do. I'm very honored to be in a position to help law enforcement. I'm proud of the work they do. You know, by and large, hundreds of thousands of, you know, very well-intentioned law enforcement officers. But, you know, in this situation in particular, right, we have an incident where the police were called for an incident where a man was, I guess, a fraudulent check was being used. They show up and, you know, they get him in handcuffs. And I guess later there was footage revealed that he wasn't really resisting arrest prior to the cuffs being applied. And then the remainder of the footage shows him cuffed, prone, with, you know, 3 officers holding him down, 1 officer with the knee directly on his neck. And it's interesting because of my profession at that point, I get, you know, tons of requests for a breakdown on, you know, how the arrest could have been done more safely. And at first I was like, wow, is that even what needs to be discussed here? And then after reflecting for a couple of days and really just looking at it and just thinking about it, we realized that, you know, this wasn't a tactical issue, right? And we know that because as we're watching it, you get to the point where the knee is on the neck, putting a lot of pressure for several minutes. And then the guy goes unconscious, right? And there were 2 other officers on the lower body, right? The torso and then the legs and the lower body of the subject when you see the camera angle and the photos from the other angle. So there was pressure being applied in many different places. So, you know, right, physiologically, we don't know exactly what happened, right? Whether there was drugs and alcohol or any other things. But one thing is for sure, right? What we do know is that the man was unconscious. And once he was rendered unconscious, pressure was continuously applied on him, at least on the upper torso in the neck area, as we saw, was continuously applied for an additional 3 minutes and 47 seconds before paramedics arrived and the pressure was released and Mr. Floyd was laid on the stretcher and taken into the ambulance and then later pronounced dead. And when I see that, and you know, I'm not a police officer, but when I see that, and I think when the rest of the world sees that, it crosses a line, right? Whether a knee in the neck is appropriate or not, right? In our defensive tactics course, we teach other positions for the knee on the thoracic vertebrae, so you avoid putting it directly across the neck. Many departments don't allow that technique, and we teach alternatives to that. But, you know, a knee might land on someone's neck at some point during a scuffle. When the person is unconscious or unresponsive, that's when I think it crosses the line. And that's where I felt, well, this goes from a technical video. It left a technical video 10 seconds after the person was unconscious. It went from a technical video to a moral video.
100%.
And, you know, so for you watching it, you know, I know you said you didn't watch the entire thing, but, you know, when it comes to law enforcement, right, when the person becomes unresponsive and unconscious, there has to be a moment where you switch gears, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you task switch into an aftercare, you know, first aid response, providing what you can to protect the subject in that situation, regardless of what crime they were being accused of. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I want to go back. And so initially, like I said, I didn't watch the whole video, but I recognized after the fact, like, hey, I have a responsibility at this point because, you know, I always tell people, you know, with influence comes responsibility. And one of the biggest things that frustrates me online is when you have a lot of people with major followings and stuff like that, but they don't consider it as a responsibility. So they'll go out there and just post whatever, not even realizing that people are, you know, they're taking that information and taking it as bond. And so I realized, like, hey, I have a responsibility to go out there and at least watch the rest of this video and gather as much information as I can before I spoke out. And so, like you said, you know, it transitioned from a tactical to a moral thing. And what I need you guys to understand is, like, we deal with situations like this all the time. As a matter of fact, on Monday, I had a very similar situation where we took a guy into custody. He had been drinking, heavily intoxicated. I could smell the alcohol. He had steel-toe boots on. So, and he was very high, up and down. And so we got him into custody. And this guy has been known to fight with officers. So anyways, we got him into custody. When we put him in the backseat of our police car, he started kicking the doors like really, really hard. And mind you, he had steel-toe boots on. So he caused him permanent damage. So we took him out of the car and he was still trying to fight with us. And mind you, he is handcuffed. So what we did is we did put him on his stomach so that way we can apply a hobble. And if you don't know what a hobble is, it's basically like a cord or a rope or whatever you want to, however you want to look at, picture it, but you tie it around their legs so that way they can stop them. You can stop that person from kicking. So as he's down on the ground, he does say, hey, look, I can't breathe, or, hey, you know, I'm hurt. And, you know, what we have to do when considering this George Floyd video is that we have to rid all the excuses first. We have to get rid of all the excuses. And one of the excuses that people will say is that, well, as officers, people lie to us all the time and tell us they can't breathe or they're hurt, and they do that as a tactic to get away or escape. We got to get rid of that excuse for this video because it doesn't apply. Like you said, you can see clearly when he goes unconscious, and at that point in time, you can see there's a lack of care by the officer that's on his neck. So going back to my situation, the moment somebody tells me that they can't breathe, we still have to treat it seriously, whether or not it's real or fake, because I don't want to be that officer that is in a situation, but because I thought he was playing or thought he was lying because he's trying to get out of the situation, that I didn't check on his well-being. We still have an obligation of checking on that subject's well-being, and it could be as simple as putting them in a position of comfort, which is rolling them on their side so you at least allow that airway to open up. Put them in the back of a police car. If he's spitting at you, because that could be an excuse. Well, he's spitting at officers. Put a spit sock on him, which is it's like a net that goes over your face. It's a breathable net that allows you to breathe, but it allows you not to spit on other. There's so many different other options that we do or we can do. So that way, if they say, hey, look, I can't breathe, I'm hurting, we can get them into a position so that way they feel better. The other thing we have to realize is that there's something that's called excited delirium. And I don't know if other agencies across the country are taught this, but I can tell you that a lot of agencies here in Southern California are taught what excited delirium is. And excited delirium is essentially, you know, where a subject goes into, you know, their body starts overheating from inside and they start kind of going crazy. And it could be attributed to PCP, methamphetamine, drugs, whatever it is. And their body literally starts to overheat. And so I've gone on situations where I can see a person experiencing excited delirium and they can't breathe, they're overheating. And immediately what we do is we roll them over, we sit them up, we get them to breathe, and we try to get them as much air as we can and wait for EMS. Watching this video yesterday, none of that happened. And that's what was so upsetting, is because it almost looked like there was a lack of concern by the officer that was on his neck. And as officers, we have an obligation that even if he was resisting, because that's another excuse. Oh, let's just say he was resisting. Even if he was resisting, at the moment he is not physically resisting you, we have an obligation to preserve life. Preservation of life is priority. I don't care if you've committed a murder. I don't care if you've committed a rape. Whatever it is, I still have an obligation to preserve life and leave it up for somebody else to judge. That's not my judgment call out there. And so the upsetting part is where they have this lack of concern, and you literally see a person pleading like, I can't breathe, and then he goes out. And I think the worst part about the video is once he goes out, he still keeps his knee on his neck. He doesn't check. If I'm quote me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think he looks down at him. And so that's what's so hard to watch, and it's just upsetting because I know the work that we're doing out there. This is not a reflection of majority of officers. I can tell you that. I work firsthand with a lot of courageous and phenomenal officers around the world, and this is not a reflection of our profession on a whole.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it was very tough to watch and listen as the people on the sidewalk one lady identified herself as, I think, either a firefighter or a fire department in Minneapolis employee, one or the other. She worked for the fire department. And the officer who was standing there verified that. You work for Minneapolis Fire? She said, yeah, Minneapolis Fire. Give me a pulse. Give me a pulse. Check his pulse.
Yeah.
And there was no consideration.
And you can, and checking a pulse is as simple as putting 2 fingers on the carotid. You can check it on the wrist. That was so frustrating, man. It's like, I've been on situations. So when people try to tell me and other officers that, hey, man, like, I just got a message right now saying, hey, even though, I understand what you're saying, but we still haven't got all the facts. It's like, trust me, there is a time and place to gather all facts. There have been situations that I've been personally put in that you need the entire facts for you to understand what it is and why I did what I did. But this was not one of those situations. And we have to, if we want to improve law enforcement, if we want to improve the bridge that we have with the community, we have to be able to call a spade a spade. And I know it's hard. One of the things I talked to you about earlier is that, my oldest son, he has a lot of aspirations to become a police officer. Like, that's what he wants to do. And so, you know, if my son wants to become a police officer, I need to leave this profession better than what it was when he gets in it. And my grandfather would always teach me that principle when I was younger. He's like, Ryan, if you walk into a room, make sure you leave that room better than what it was when you walked in. And so I take that same philosophy and I apply it to my profession, because law enforcement's only getting harder. And why would I want my son to come into a deeply strained profession that could, one, compromise his safety, compromise his family, whatever it may be. And so if I have anything that if there's anything I can do to help my son out, I want to do it to leave that profession better, which is why my motto is, you know, I'm going to change the face of modern day policing. But the only way to change modern day policing is by being willing to call a spade a spade. And I know it's tough for our officers out there. I know it's hard to acknowledge it, but that's the only way we're going to be able to develop trust and accountability amongst the community. Because if we don't do that, man, I can tell you, man, Henry, is not going to be good. It is not going to be good at all.
Yeah, it's keeping it getting tougher. And I've done so many Gracie breakdowns on use of force incidents. And it's interesting that at the end of every video, not every, but several of them, I make a very deliberate case where I say, listen, you guys, these officers are undertrained. These officers are not given, but what, you know the deal, 4 hours a year of defensive tactics. It's kind of a joke. You know, and in many cases, better training would have resolved the situation more efficiently, right? And respecting that. The officers simply didn't have the bandwidth or the training bandwidth to handle the situation safely. So then maybe they used force prematurely. They have utilized deadly force when they maybe shouldn't have, who knows? And I look at that and I go, oh my gosh, if that officer only had the tactics to control the subject more efficiently, more effectively, and with less violence, that person would still be alive.
100%.
And that's why I struggled looking at this one, because I went, wow.
This isn't one of them.
I don't know what amount of training I could have given in this situation that would have, because the guy was cuffed, prone, and there were 3 people on him and he was unconscious.
Yep.
So there's no training I could have provided that would have given the officer in that situation kind of the moral, right? The moral bandwidth to say, this is wrong what I'm doing. If that wasn't wrong to him then, it's not going to be right. It's not going to be wrong to him because he learned some new control tactics, right? What was there spoke for itself. And that's why it was such a struggle. But at the end of so many of my videos, I make a concerted effort to articulate the fact that every single time a video like this, a very remarkable incident, a use of force incident that really captures, right, goes viral and captures an audience and the world is watching, every time that happens, I make a concerted effort to tell the public, you guys, we cannot let there be 2 tragedies here. The one tragedy of someone losing their life, right, can never be undone. And whatever the situation was in a different breakdown, right, George Floyd is not coming back. Justice will be served, hopefully, and those officers have been terminated, and now we wait to see, you know, the justice system do what it does. And we hope that in this case, it does better than what has sometimes in previous cases let us down as a community, as a nation, right? But again, that's out of our hands. I always remind the public, don't let there be 2 tragedies when something like this happens. One, the incident itself. The other is the generalization of law enforcement to where people look at a video or an incident like this and say, yeah, F the police. And now all of a sudden they're at fire towards all of law enforcement, the profession, because of what they saw in one video. And what's interesting is I was prepared to come here today and, right, because it's intriguing. Why is it that when a police officer or police officers, right, multiple cases over, right, that go viral over the course of the years, why is it that when these cases go viral, the profession is attacked by everyone so enthusiastically, whereas let's say you get teachers, school teachers who, right, you know, have inappropriate relations with children.
Nobody says anything.
No one says, hey, we hate all teachers. F the Teachers Administration of America. They don't say that. And when doctors are convicted of malpractice, right? Let's just say very inappropriate malpractice, you know, conviction against doctor or multiple doctors over a period of time. We don't say, hey, we hate doctors as a society, right? Or my personal case, jiu-jitsu or martial arts instructors who, you know, sexual assault on one of their students, and it's on camera and it's obvious, or it happens and a conviction is made. And then you go to the industry of martial arts and, you know, why is it that no one says, hey, all of martial arts is bad? all of a sudden I still have a great reputation, even though many of my martial arts people in my industry have done terrible things to their students. I don't take the rap for it, but somehow law enforcement, when anyone does bad, everyone is bad.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me, you know, this reality that policing as a whole was subjected to. And I was prepared here to come today and ask and really make that same plea to say, guys, this is a tragedy, but let's not let one tragedy be two tragedies.
Exactly.
But then I was reflecting, and instead of just kind of bringing that hope to this discussion today, I sat with it and I said, wait a minute, why is it that happens in law enforcement and in little to no other industries, right? Why is it? And that was the real question that I wanted to kind of reflect on and bring an idea to. And what I realized, and you touched on it earlier, is that one of the reasons, certainly there may be more than one, but what I believe the strongest reasons why the general public, right, collectively condemns law enforcement when they see these incidents is because police officers rarely speak out against police officers, even in cases of, right, very obvious and very extreme, you know, acts of injustice.
That's why I come out and I speak out against the bad. Because if we want the community to take law enforcement serious, if we want the community to have trust in law enforcement, then yes, it will take us speaking out against the bad things that do occur in law enforcement. Because we can't sit here and act like every single police officer is good. We can't sit here and act like every single police department is perfect, because we're not, just like anything else. And that's why we have to bring the human aspect of it. So that's why I do what I do from Breaking Barriers United, because I try to attach the human side of it. I want you guys to get to know Ryan Tillman, not Officer Tillman. Because if you get to know Ryan Tillman, you may understand that, you know, morally my compass is okay, ethically my compass is okay, and from a tactical standpoint, it's okay. And so when you start judging a situation based off of Ryan Tillman, it might be a lot different from Officer Tillman. And so we have to be so careful as officers to make sure, like, yes, if something goes bad, we have to call a spade out. And that's why I did what I did yesterday, because I recognize if my son does go into law enforcement in 20 years, if I can do my part to make this profession better, and he has the community to back him, so that day when he is in a situation that may cost him his life, at least he knows that the community is going to back him because they trust him. And that's where, if I can say one message to officers out there right now is, I know it's scary, I know it's uncharted water, but we have to be courageous and we have to stand up for wrong is wrong. This situation involving George Floyd was bad, not just because of George Floyd losing his life, but think about the consequences for the officers' families that are involved in this. I don't know that officer who put his knee on his neck. I don't. For all I know, he can be a church-going man. I don't know. He could have been having a bad day. But what I do know is there's more than one person that's affected by this. I have to realize that. And so we have to be able to forgive. Like you said, let the justice system do what the justice system does. I know people feel like the justice system has failed many times, but that can't cause us to lose hope. Where you find your hope is that the guys like you, guys like me, guys like AJ, other people that are doing work to move this profession forward. I'm going to leave you on this note. You know, I get a lot of comments in my DMs, and, you know, I get a lot of people that come to the department I work at that are trying to work there. And my chief had hit me up and he said, Ryan, you know, what's crazy is like almost every person that drops an app, they mention your name. And the reason they want to come work here is not only because they've seen the work that you're doing, but they know what our department represents by the work that you're doing. And the reason that's so cool for me is because that's the hope right there. Because you have people that hitting me up in their DM saying, hey, look, I want to go out there and serve my community better. I want to go out there and change his profession. That's where we find hope. That's where George Floyd's name won't die in vain, because there's going to be other people that are dedicated to making sure the way we do policing is a lot better. And that's why, like I say, I'm always dedicated to making sure I change the face of modern day policing.
Thank you for that, Ryan. Yeah. So it's so ironic, right? Is that now let's be clear. I think it's the right time to kind of insert the disclaimer and the recognition that police officers have one of the most challenging professions in that they're often required to make split-second decisions, right? Hindsight is 20/20, split-second. And I know this because I trained them and we train for those. So split-second decisions. and things happen, and maybe things happen sometimes that they regret because in the heat of the moment they just acted the way they did. So number one, there's that consideration, and I respect that. Number two, there's also the consideration that when a video goes viral, we don't have all the facts, right? We only have it from the time that we saw, from the time that video ends. And as you know well, that's only a snapshot in time. And a lot of times the criticism, even when I do breakdowns, is, Henry, you don't have all the facts.
Yeah.
And I go, you're right. And that's why I'm not making all the judgment. I'm just showing one technique on a situation that could have been done differently. So I limit my input. And this is the first time that I've ever spoken beyond the tactical, and really in no way about the tactical, even though I have some things to say about that. This is way bigger than that. So I respect the snapshot in time. I respect the split-second difficulty of police work. But that being said, you said it, call a spade a spade. That being said, right, when we have enough evidence, enough video, enough information, right, to give us all what we need to know beyond a reasonable doubt. When I look at that video, it's clear to me that the priority there was not to protect and serve. Mm-hmm. Once he was unconscious and unresponsive, and you maintain pressure for another 3 minutes and 47 seconds, protecting and serving cannot be identified as the top priority in that situation. So what I'm saying, and what you're saying is, listen, you got to call a spade, but that has to have an asterisk of, we also have to consider that investigations need to be conducted, split-second decisions have to be respected, short snippets of video have to be considered as not the whole story. All those considerations, and I know you took that into consideration when you're saying that, but that's why you're careful about when you speak out. But when there is an incident, and let's just use this George Spade as the example, when there's an incident like this that is as undeniably problematic and injustice as it is, we just have to be able to call it out. Because 100%. If you don't, right, you mentioned that, the family of the 4 officers involved are at risk now. Well, I'll take that one step further. Every single police officer in America is at greater risk because of the incident that went viral.
Yes.
And the only way to balance that back is for police, right, the profession as a whole, to look at that like you've done and say, hey, here's why this is wrong. Now, they can also put an asterisk and say, we don't have all the information. There may be footage before and after, but everything that I saw, based on everything that I saw, no resistance, right? Someone down there prone, handcuffed, no threat, not a violent crime. It was not even, we know the facts about why they were called. So do the officers. There was no weapon involved, and this person was killed, right? So with all those facts, you can place an opinion. You can state what you feel about that, because failure to do that, like I mentioned with the analogies I tried to make, failure to do that puts the public in a position to say, okay, if police are not going to have an opinion about their own, then we have to have an opinion about police in 100%. General.
You're 100% correct.
And for the way I look at it in my profession, you came to me and said, Henner, there's a martial artist down the street who every time, female students are showing up, they're engaging in sexual misconduct with the student and harassment and assault. And if I go like this, well, you're sure of that, right? Yeah, we have video. We have video. We've seen it 100% on video, captured every time they come in, they leave very upset. It's happening. Once I see the video, if I go, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
it's terrible. I don't speak out against it, then I'm part of the problem.
You're part of the problem. Exactly. And you're so right on that. There's a line. So when we go to the academy, we rehearse something. It's called the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. And there's a specific line in that Law Enforcement Code of Ethics that says, we have to develop or maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. That right there sums up this whole situation, is that officer did not develop self-restraint. That officer was not mindful of the welfare of others. And this is what's supposed to be ingrained in us. This is supposed to be the oath. So every time I measure a video, every time I do a debrief on a video, I measure it up with 4 things: ethical, moral, tactical, and the oath that I took. And if it measures up to that, that's how I start to figure out what's real and what's not, and whether or not this was right or this was wrong. This one was clearly wrong. And the unfortunate part, man, is that I was looking at some of the comments, man. You post stuff and people just literally start arguing about the wrong things, like missing the whole point. They get into verbiage or how you said this or how you said that. And it's like a man lost his life that didn't need to lose his life. An officer was wrong, and he needs to be punished for it. And so we need to get on that. We need to make sure that, like you said, as officers, we have to hold each other accountable. I know it's hard. I know every single time that I speak out, every single time I do a Tillman take on my video or on my page, on my Instagram page, I know that I open myself up to ridicule by officers across the world. I also know that I open myself up to ridicule amongst the community. But I also know that it takes that type of courageous posture in order to change the direction of where we're going to go as a society. It takes that. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, anybody that's gone before us that changed, literally interrupted or disrupted society as we knew it. They did something that was painful. They did something that was hard, and they did something that took a courageous act. And so that my faith in Jesus Christ, that's what pushes me forward to do it. And I know it's not going to be easy, but I know it's something that must be done. And so, man, I get so passionate about this situation, man. It was hard to watch, but we must be better as police officers. We must. And the way, if you're an officer watching this right now, if you're wondering how you can go out and change, things and make things better, you can go out day to day and make things better with every person you interact, without a doubt. When you go to work today, you can go out there and make things better just by your mere interaction with that person. But if you want to do something right now to start making this profession better, we have to stop making excuses. We have to stop making excuses. Call a spade. I know it's hard, because I know just as much as I call a spade, I can be put in a situation today when I go to work at 2:00 that might be seen on CNN or Fox News tomorrow and looked upon by the world as being controversial. I know that. And I know I risk that every single time I make a video, because if something like that happens, I know they're going to go back to my social media. They're going to go back and pick apart every single thing that I say. I know I can be put on that pedestal tomorrow, but it doesn't rid the fact that I still have to stand up and do what's right, because we have an obligation as public servants to our communities. We have an obligation to serve. And when we see wrong, we have to be able to call it out.
And there's the irony in all of it, right? Is that police officers who don't speak out against the injustice and the use of power and the wrong when it is wrong think that they are protecting law enforcement by doing so. But the irony is
hurting us.
It's actually the exact opposite, right? The only thing, right, that speaking out, you want to protect your fellow brothers and sisters in blue. The best way to do that is to speak out and identify when what's wrong is wrong. And then the public can look at law enforcement as a profession and say, okay, there are some good, which we know to be the truth. There are most good, some bad. And when the bad act up, the good call them on it.
Yep.
So we're good. We're in good hands, because they will hold themselves accountable.
Yep.
We don't have to come down on the whole profession every time an incident happens, because they're going to come down on themselves where it's necessary and where it's appropriate.
So real quick, and to the community, and this is my plea, because I made my plea to officers, but to the community, we have to make sure that when we do see officers doing right, when we know that there's more to, we have to be able to see it, acknowledge it, and come with the same energy just as much when an officer does bad. Here's why. Not to get into politics at all. There's a lot of division in politics, people on the far left, people on the far right. There's so much people that hate Donald Trump so passionately, and I'm not saying I support him or not, but there's a lot of people that hate him. And I always use this analogy. If he were to go out there and save 100 million starving kids tomorrow, would you be able to acknowledge the fact that he saved those 100 million starving kids? Or would you be so caught up in a word or a gesture that he said that you didn't agree with, and your hate in your heart for him is so much disdainful for him that you couldn't even see or acknowledge what he did for the people that were hurting? And it's that same concept in law enforcement. The sad part is like, I see a lot of social media accounts where they will only post stuff when it's bad. Only post stuff when it's bad. The thing that makes my social media account unique is that you're going to get the bad and the good. You're going to get both. You're not going to get one side. And the reason why that's so important is because, like I say, when you have a platform, when you have influence, that influence comes with the responsibility. And we have to recognize and acknowledge that, unfortunately, some people in our society, they don't get news from anywhere else other than Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you're that person that they follow, and if you're that credible news source that they follow, and the only stuff you put out is negativity, then guess what? Their perception of law enforcement is only going to be negative because of the message you're constantly sending out, which is why I try to remain as neutral as I can, because I want people to know at the very end of the day, they know Ryan's going to call it as he calls it. I might be wrong. I'm not saying I'm perfect. And I'm not saying that every single breakdown I'm going to do is going to be 100% spot on. But you guys all know my heart. And you guys know my heart is to make sure that I remain neutral as much as I can be. So that way I'm not biased when I'm giving you guys these breakdowns.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, I think it's clear for both the public and for law enforcement. You know, this, like I said, nothing will bring back George Floyd. And, you know, his loss was tragic for sure. The question is, can we grow from this?
We will.
Right?
Can
we grow? And right now it's fresh, it's brand new, and it's, you know, it's still upon us. And it's very painful, especially the people who knew him closest, his community there, you know, Minneapolis. It's unimaginable what they're going through, and his family, right? This is,
everybody's affected.
Yeah.
Everybody's affected.
You know, the question then becomes, how much can we learn from this on the public, on the law enforcement side? And what are we doing? What can we do? What are we willing to do to reduce the likelihood that this ever happens again? It will, but reduce the frequency, I should say, between incidents like this. And B, to bridge the gap, so that when incidents happen, you know, they look at it as we condemn the person or persons involved, not the profession. If we can do that, I think we're moving to a much better place. And like you said, your son wants to be a police officer. And I hope that by the time he is, and he becomes one, that it's safer to be a police officer than it is today.
Yeah, it will, man. It will. And my desire is to make sure I change that for the better. And so, you know, if we wanted solutions, don't fuel the fire, and support those that really have a desire to change things. That's all I can say, man. Don't fuel the fire and support those that have a desire to change. You know, that's a 1-2 punch.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And man, really congratulations, man. All the good work you're doing. It's very rare. It's very unique. Law enforcement needs more like you. And, you know, if every department had a Ryan Tillman, the world would be a better place, because you really are in your community, right? You're really doing special work. But unfortunately, and this also speaks to the segmentation of law enforcement, there isn't one national police body that really is doing the work to bridge the gap and to break the barriers between law enforcement and the community they serve. It's happening on a very localized level. So, you know, it's a challenge, but I appreciate the effort you're putting forward, man. It's major. It's necessary. Don't stop no matter what. I do think you're making a difference for the police today and for the future, including your son. And that's it, everyone. You guys, if you can, follow Ryan and all his projects at Breaking Barriers United on Instagram and social media there. You have your podcast as well that you do good work on.
Yeah, the It's Needed podcast. It's hashtag It's Needed. And I believe our YouTube channel is It's Needed as well, or Breaking Barriers United. Yeah, Breaking Barriers United. You can watch all of our YouTube. And we're going to have you on, Henry, man. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm going to come train with you guys, man. And you guys are going to see I'm going to embarrass myself when I train. So
it's all good, bro. That's my specialty. We'll take care of you. And I appreciate you coming on this for short notice. And to everyone watching, thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks again, Henry. God bless.
All right, guys.